there's a lot that we can cover in basics of online and community engagement. So the way that I've structured the webinar is lots of tips. And if you have any questions on any of the tips that I covered today, feel free to reach out to me afterwards. I do a lot of strategy work as well with clients, not even those some that don't even use Eugenie, that just help them from a digital strategy point of view. We work with over 50 organizations on digital strategy, online engagement, and community. So it is good I see a lot of trends and work with them to create their digital funnels. Today's agenda is a little bit of Zoomticket, some introductions, which is of me and Eugenie, and then our top tips. So the Zoomticket is, yes, feel free to share who you are, what you do in the chat. I won't be checking the chat until the end, so if you have any questions, I will address those at the end. Otherwise, I will stop midway through. But otherwise, do feel free to add questions and introductions of yourself into the chat. So what is Eugenie? Just most of you, I think, already do know it. Eugenie is a private platform for engagement of communities of all kinds. And it was born because we wanted to give our own community, our own religious community, a better way to connect with their members outside of social media. Social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all of these platforms, I think, are fantastic for growth if used properly. So I do say that with a caveat. In terms of engagement online, if there's no strategy or no measurement of whether it's working for you, I think it's a waste of time, if I may say. So a lot of times I ask people when I start to work with them to say, fine, you say you're working with LinkedIn, you're working with Facebook, how much time are you spending on these platforms? And what is your return? Are you actually getting any customers in, or even leads into your business? Because ultimately, even your time is quite valuable. So Eugenie is that, if we speak in marketing terms, the bottom of that funnel. We're being used by lots of different brands, coaches, membership associations, business networks, and the like. So if you want to try us out, you can go to the website and set up a 30-day trial to see if it might be right for your business. And within that, you'd get a strategy session with me as well. You've all booked and probably seen our other events that are coming up, but this week we're also hosting customer retention tomorrow night, basics of customer retention, basics of DIY and SEO, and then a masterclass on webinars at the end of the week. So let's just jump into the tips. So I've already mentioned in this call that strategy, not technology, determines the success of any online initiative. And working with all of our customers and doing, we've started these community leader calls as well. And one of the common things that comes up across any sort of online engagement is, how do we pull people from social media? How do we kind of compete with the noise that's on social platforms? And I'm going to talk about some of those tips today. But ultimately, the technology can only do so much. It's the strategy behind either building or engaging in a community online, or even an audience. And I'll talk about the difference between an audience and a community. It's all in the strategy. And without a clear-cut strategy of what you want to achieve, who you're trying to serve, any online community is going to fail. And so if we take a look at the difference between an audience and a community, I'm going to jump straight into it and ask you, would your online group continue without you, without your content, without your incentives? So Eugenie will at some stage definitely add some gamification principles so that you can incentivize members, you can incentivize your users to engage online. Because one of the key things we're trying to achieve in an online community is that it can exist without you. There's a voice there. People want to engage, they want to post. Not only does that make it easier for you to run your community, because in the beginning, one of the tips I will share is that it takes quite a lot of nurturing, responding quickly, being there all the time to make sure your community has that foundation to get off the ground. But what we're trying to achieve is that the community has its own voice. So if we look at kind of a list of what the difference between an audience and a community are, in an audience, yes, you've got people listening, you have some engagement. That might just be people liking a post. I have a huge, I think the like versus a comment is a huge way to understand whether people are listening, because a lot of times you can like a post without even reading it. And if you get a comment, you know that someone has read it, processed it, and is bringing what you're saying into, is actually engaging with that in a more meaningful way. Posting relevant content as well. So, when we talk about targeting relevant content at the right people, that is super important. We can't, as brands, use a one-size-fits-all strategy anymore. People just see it as noise and they phase it out. And this is a bit about gamification and loyalty points. So I think one of the tips we'll talk about is being careful of how you use incentivization and gamification. Because if you took those incentives away, would people still continue to engage with you and your community? And if not, then that's not a long-term sustainable strategy. Further, if you have to invest, let's just say every time someone comes and does something, you give them a free session or you give them something free because you're giving value away. You have to see if you can sustain, again, that not only for long term, but at scale. So would you be able to give, a session away to 10 people if your community is 10? Yes, probably, if it's 30-minute sessions, for example. But what if it grows to 2,000? Would what you're giving away be sustainable? So when we're looking at building an online engaged community, we were looking for things like giving them a group that might be not what your brand is, giving them an identity, having their own symbols and having a shared narrative, having a value system. And essentially, we want that community to start talking and engaging and connecting on its own without you having to do all of that yourself. And so in terms of social media to engage community, the way we can look at social media is a great big space to go and make lots and lots of shallow connections, right? So we're putting out content, we're sharing, posts, tips, videos, whatever it might be on whatever strategy that you're using. You then want to try to gain a follower who you're trying to convert into a customer. And ultimately, if you're trying to build that online community, we want to get them to be an engaged member of a community. My gut is off a social media platform, someplace that you control, and then eventually turning them into an ambassador. And in the customer retention webinar that we do, it's all about saying, if you can build a very strong customer base who end up becoming your ambassador, that is the cheapest way to acquire customers. And it's actually the strongest recommendation or referral that a new customer can get. So tip number one, we want to define the objectives and goals of the community. So, you've decided to set up a community, and that can be on any platform. I'll talk about some of the pros and cons of the various big ones at the moment. But ultimately, you need to understand what your objectives and goals are, right? So if you're using a platform or a community to host all your coaching clients, it's a very different community than trying to build something that's going to get product purchasing. So, we can see on Facebook is a big example of where people are hosting their communities. There's lots and lots of different types of communities, from moms groups to people using Facebook groups to host their coaching programs. So again, defining the objectives and goals of what you're trying to achieve is going to make a big impact on both your content plan, how you're engaging people online, and ultimately where you host your community as well. I would suggest definitely to join other communities who are fulfilling the need that you've defined, observe and learn. And this is because you want to understand what are the types of people who you would like to have in your own community. What are their concerns? So you're not just looking at your competitor to see, okay, what is this competitor posting and how can I kind of learn from that? But it's more about observing what the members in the communities are talking about. So, what questions are they asking? How are they interacting with one another? What are the challenges that they're facing? Because ultimately, there are quite a lot of communities out there. I would be very surprised if someone said to me, "Oh, I'm building this community and there's nothing else like it on the market." Even Eugenie isn't unique. It has competitors. It has building online communities, building platforms is a huge space, especially right now and in the digital world that we're going into. So we really need to understand what are the challenges of the people we want to serve, so that we can understand what our USP might be, but also how we can better serve those. And kind of a caveat on this tip is, if you're going to do this in Facebook groups where you're observing or anywhere, be very careful about trying to do what I would call poaching, because people can see that. So it is more about observing. Maybe in the right time and place you can mention what you're doing, but you want to build relationships in these communities as well, not just go into them and start selling. Identifying your ideal member and client so you can attract the right people and create the right relevant content. Content creation is a huge part. One of the tips is content. Well, I think community is king, but we hear this thing about content being king. Now, we want to identify that ideal member and client so that you spend your time creating the right content for them, right? So if I said that Eugenie was only for nurseries, and it is one of the use cases that we have, people use it for parent and nursery and school communities. But if I was just focusing on that audience and I started to bring in content that was completely irrelevant, that is focused on our small business community clients, then my nursery clients are going to tune me out. They're not going to find that content relevant, and ultimately in the longer term, they're not going to find our product or our service valuable. And so in addition to helping you create content that's super targeted, saving you time, it is making your community member really get value from the content that you're delivering to them. And as I said before, customers really want to feel today that you're talking directly to them. So a one-size-all approach just doesn't work in marketing, engagement, and or retention. And we hear quite a lot about all these various systems that are out there to really help us personalize our experience. So, you know, when you send out an email campaign, they're having the name in there, but even just having a little bit more context and building, if you're using a CRM or using any sort of system, creating tags and sending relevant content to the right people will actually make your email open rates go drastically higher. So, you know, we have our emails that we send out to our entire database, and we have very targeted emails that we send out to people who either sign up for a specific webinar or for a specific type of thing. So when we then do a follow-up, we're not sending it to everyone, and our open rates are very high on those targeted emails. In terms of creating a look, name, feel that represents your brand but is unique to the community, because ultimately your community is, yes, a place to have warm leads or your customers, but again, you want them to feel that it is something special, and they feel one of our customers is a gentleman named Piyush Patel. He's a Federation of Small Businesses membership advisor, and he's created a Eugenie community as a value add. So it's above and beyond what the Federation of Small Businesses is offering, which is quite a lot. But what he's done is created something he's called The Family. And it is a members only community, which he's hosting on Eugenie, which has lots of added value that members can't get anywhere else. And that's the other tip. Yesterday, we had a community leader call for Eugenie. And one of the questions was, again, how do we get people to engage in our Eugenie community versus Facebook? Now, wherever you host your community, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn, a WhatsApp group, you want people to have affinity and loyalty to that group and that community. And you also want them to feel like there's content and value there that they cannot get anywhere else. And that helps you keep engagement high in the place that you've chosen to host your community. Going into the right platform, right? There's pros and cons of everything. So we've got the big four. We've got Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. And of course, now you've kind of got the WhatsApp groups that are starting as well. And then there's platforms like us, which like Eugenie and Mighty Networks. Now, choosing the right platform is really important. And it may be that you change platforms later on, and you may start someplace like Facebook groups, build that as a funnel, and then host your actual private community in a MemberPress site, wherever that might be. What you're looking for is, in terms of, can your platform scale and what will it look like? So right now you may have 10 people, depending, you bring in as your early adopters. But if your goal is to grow your community to, let's say, 10,000 people, is that platform that you've chosen going to scale with you? Is it going to give you what you need at the various points of your journey? Is it going to be easy to switch over from, let's say, WhatsApp to Facebook or WhatsApp to an email distribution list? How easy it is to make that shift? And I think the ultimate thing that I always say that's the most important in choosing the right platform, I know price we're not even going to talk about, but is analytics. Is your platform giving you the relevant analytics of the types of things you want to measure? So that might be return rates, that might be what people are looking at from a content perspective, general trends. What is the analytics the platform is giving you to help you with your everything else in your digital strategy? Because the data, actually, one of the points that we talk about later is feedback, getting feedback. Now, if any of you have ever sent out a survey, survey open rates, even 25% can be good. So it's hard to get people to give us answers in a survey. So if we can garner any behavioral data from our platform, we can serve our communities better without even needing them to tell us. And to be honest, I've asked and done a lot of surveys. People always say one thing and they actually do quite different things. So being able to monitor that behavior is really important. So in tips, I can share these slides with you guys so you can go a little bit further in, but, looking at the budget, looking at how easy it is to share content. Does it allow for push notifications in our, I know we're in lockdown right now, but mobile apps are a great way to push great content using those features. And again, can you customize the platform to make it feel and look like your own brand? Content planning. So content planning is a big place where I see people fall down. Creating a content plan based on your channels that fosters engagement is crucial because, especially in online communities, content is the only way you're going to build a relationship in the early days with people, right? So people don't sign up to products and services immediately. You need a funnel to start getting people into your community, and then you also need a plan on how to keep them there. And ultimately, the principles of the content plan is about staying organized so that you're building a cadence. I don't know if you've ever heard of, the regular posting and why people do that. it's not necessarily just because it makes your life easier. You can schedule posts, you can have topics, but also it starts to build up an expectation within your community of what they're going to get. So they'll start to expect that email. They'll start to see, oh, I'm waiting for that post. And ultimately, it's starting to build that behavioral trends for what you want your community to do. And also it helps you stay organized so that a lot of the people that use Eugenie and a lot of people that I work with are small business owners. And we have so many different hats when we're running our own businesses that if we're not creating that content plan, staying organized, then sometimes we can get caught up in the day-to-day running of the business, and we can forget that we want to post something, and it's 3 o'clock and I should have posted this at 9 o'clock this morning. So staying organized, having a content plan definitely allows us to engage that community in a much more meaningful way. So these are just some of the tips on that in terms of the things that you can do on a daily and weekly and monthly basis. Now, again, coming back to your objectives in the beginning and looking at what your objectives are for the community is going to help you understand what you're able to actually achieve on a practical level. I would say responding to your groups and individual comments on a daily basis. I mean, one of the tips is respond quickly and always. I've seen communities definitely fall down because they'll start to get members into the group members will start to post, and then nobody will respond to them. And that doesn't incentivize a post next time. It doesn't incentivize someone to want to post again. A lot of times we get one shot, and people will then understand from that what they feel the community might give them in the future. So again, I will share this presentation with anybody that wants it in a follow-up from today, so you can go into this a bit more in depth. Creating a marketing funnel which leads your prospective members to your home base. So today is not, in terms of the ongoing online engagement and building the community elements, we also need to find our members. We need to figure out, what we want to achieve with this community, who those people are, and then where we might find them, and getting them into your online community or your, what I call, home base. So it might be that you actually have a large Facebook group, which is your big marketing funnel, and you're getting lots and lots of people in there. Now, Facebook, to be honest, I think is one of those things that has lots of pros and lots of cons. And ultimately, right now, I'm getting a lot of feedback from members, from our communities and prospective people who are signing up to say their members are not seeing their content. So they're spending all this time building content plans, scheduling posts when people are not seeing it. Now, there are things that you can do on Facebook. Facebook recently changed its preferences for group notifications, in that you have to go back into the group as a member and say you want to see those things in your feed and you want to get those notifications. So they've turned them off by default. Members have to go back and add them in. So there are definitely things that you can do to help make your visibility on Facebook higher. But ultimately, I think, especially if you have a paid community or a community where you want to have control and make sure that people are seeing things, I would host it someplace else. So that might even be a newsletter. It might be that you're doing, everything based with email. But ultimately, home base should be a place that you control. Setting metrics for success as well. And this is, it's all, if you see a theme here, is it's all about that plan and that strategy and understanding what success means to you. So, I've got some communities and clients and perspectives that I've spoken to who say, if I have 10 clients, I have 10 coaches, that my business is coaching, and I just need 10 people for me to be happy and for my book to be full. And so the strategy for that person is going to be very, very different to someone who's going to say to me, actually, I want 300 recurring memberships, that are being paid on a monthly basis. To get 300 recurring memberships, we need to get quite a large number of leads for those to be able to then convert and become an active or paying member of a community. So setting those metrics are going to determine the success of your strategy in terms of marketing, retention, and also customer success. And so these are some of the tips that you can take a look at. So how many new members join, how many members are leaving, what members are actively participating. So again, some of these are more about the retention bits. And acquiring a customer today in the digital market is 13 to 15 times more expensive. I mean, there's lots of different studies that some will say 7, some will say 16, but consistently I'm seeing around that 13 to 15 mark, that it's that much more expensive to get someone into your community. So there is an acquisition cost, right, when you're building an online community from a business perspective. How much is it costing you to get that member there? And we want to work really hard to make sure that they stay there, because again, keeping someone in the community, keeping that customer is much, much easier than it is to acquire a new one. Creating and introducing guidelines. Now, you want to have, a lot of times, I'm guessing most of you are in Facebook groups. You'll see that pinned post that will say, these are the group rules. Most people don't read them, but it is good to have them there. And then again, being there to reinforce those rules. Because I think the worst thing for me as a consumer is being in a group where the rules are not consistently kind of enforced. And WhatsApp, I think, is becoming quite a noisy place. People are taking their groups onto WhatsApp thinking it's more private, but thinking about the advantages of WhatsApp, that it's quick, it's timely, people can banter, but ultimately, if you don't have some rules in place, then that banter can also be quite frustrating for other people who are not necessarily engaging in that real-time conversation. I'm in a WhatsApp group called the Happy People, and they're very good about enforcing the rules of the groups. There's one group that actually is called Happy People Socials, and it's all about sharing plans, social plans for people to meet up, so entrepreneurs, founders, that sort of thing. And the rule is, this is where I'm going to be, this is the time, please come if you want, or just DM me. Because of the fact that we are in lockdown and we can't go anywhere, Happy People Socials is in lockdown. So it's very group that group admin decided to shut that down because people were starting to have irrelevant conversations. And although we all use WhatsApp now for a lot of things, and it's, for me, getting quite noisy, it is a great space to have real-time banter, but it has to be monitored. And if you're going to use it as a customer engagement channel, definitely making sure that you are having those guidelines and enforcing them. Slack is another tool that, of course, a lot of teams are using, especially in the business context. And there are quite a lot of rules, I think, within Slack. I mean, Slack is also got pros and cons. And again, I can share these for any of you who use Slack for your management. I don't necessarily think Slack is a scalable community solution. I think it's great potentially in the early days for small communities, but I use it for talking to my developing team, which it's great for. I don't think Slack is great for large communities for lots of reasons. Tip 11. So welcome and set the tone with your new members. You want to make them feel welcome. You want to introduce them and make them feel like they are welcome in your community setting. You want to encourage networking and not selling. So this is the last tip I'm going to leave you with, because there's, I think I've covered so much already in terms of you want to network and not sell. And I think a lot of times, especially for those of you that are building business communities where it's maybe a networks like Athena. So the Athena network is a network of small business owner. It's a ladies' lunchtime networking for business. And ultimately, it's all about building relationships, right? We don't necessarily sell immediately to people. People who do networking wrong, I think, are the ones that will go out, hand lots of cards out, and immediately start selling. Whereas it is about building relationships. So your community can be that place for your members to build further relationships with one another. For a multitude of purposes. But if you're using it for a small business community, if you're using it for a network, it's important to be encouraging building those relationships versus just selling at each other. Because if someone joins your community just so that they can get an ROI or start getting new customers, as soon as they don't get the customers or they don't get more work, they will leave. So again, it's coming back and looking at the objectives of what you've built this community for and what you hope people will get out of it. So I'm just going to stop there. I have just a few minutes for questions in case there's anything into the chat. I'm going to just take a look quickly. But ultimately, I hope that was helpful for you guys. I will share all the slides with you in the follow-up email. If you'd like to book a time with me to talk about your specific community online objectives and goals, I will also share that in the email. So you're more than, you can book that 30-minute call with me to look at your online engagement and digital community building. And we're also running a webinar on how to run webinars. It's a masterclass on Saturday. And anyone who's attending anything this week will get 25% off of that. So it's a 3-hour, really hands-on. And I'll leave you with one final tip before I need to end this 30-minute power session, is that webinars are converting for me. They're converting for a lot of the people that I work with. And, our digital marketer is a big believer in webinar funnels, especially right now when we can't be meeting each other in real life. So some of the work that I've been doing with clients recently, especially coaches and people who use networking as a big way to bring in business, is how do I replicate that? Now, we're all going to online Zooms with 50, 30 people. It's great because you're meeting more people, but when you're meeting someone in real life, you get their energy, you get to know them, you can start building that relationship, which I think is much harder online. But ultimately, if you're doing webinars to talk about a value proposition, a service, your product, there's 4 different ways that you can use webinars and achieve some sort of conversion. So we're doing a 4-hour class on Saturday. If anyone's interested in that as well, I'll send out the promo code. Again, hopefully you guys found that very helpful. And we'd love to see you at one of our other webinars this week. And feel free to book a time with me if you'd like to speak about your community in specific.